Hi, hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jenny, and it has been a little while since I last uploaded a video. So I thought that today I would start with a little bit of housekeeping, just kind of a little bit of an update on how often I'm making videos, how often I plan to make them or hope to make them over the summer, but I will put a timestamp somewhere in the air so that you can jump ahead of that if you're just interested in the knitting, if you'd rather not listen to me ramble about scheduling. Hopefully it'll be a bit more interesting than scheduling, but still, if you'd like to jump ahead, no problem at all. I will put that timestamp on the screen. And then you can jump right ahead to the knitting projects that I wanted to talk about today. But first, I did just want to chat a little bit. I have been fairly deliberate in not setting myself a firm filming schedule since I started this. A big part of that is health and making sure that this stays fun. You know, I am doing this as an extension of the knitting hobby for fun. It's you know, not something that I want to become stressful or feel like an obligation, because then, you know, what's the point? So I have not been setting myself any kind of schedule, and that's been working really well, but life has been a little bit busier lately. You know, the usual health dips, as I have, but I also had, I mean, some lovely things. I had a friend visiting from Canada last week, which was really, really delightful. I hadn't seen him in a very, very long time, so that was really lovely, and I was hoping to squeeze in a video before he arrived, and it just didn't happen. But I foresee more things like that happening over the course of the summer. I often go away in the summer. This year I am going away quite a bit. In July I often work out of town. That's something that I've been doing for almost 7 or 8 years or so, and it's really joyful. It's something I really love to do, but it does definitely disrupt my schedule, and it's quite intensive while I'm there. So I'm not sure how much I will be posting over the next couple of weeks. And then there's a little bit of holiday time later in the summer. So all of that rambling just to say, I know that I haven't set any type of schedule before, so maybe you aren't wondering about this at all, but you know, I am definitely feeling much more of a sense of community through doing this, you know, in the last couple of months than I was right at the beginning. So many of you have been so lovely and leave really long, thoughtful comments, and you know, I'm really feeling like I'm starting to speak to some you know, individual and you know, just I'm starting to speak to kind of, you know, extended friends type of thing. And I mean, I realize we haven't met, but you know, you've left some really lovely comments, and I want to honor that, you know, contribution, that connection, by making sure that you don't think that I've just disappeared, or that, you know, I've decided to stop making videos and won't come back. So that's definitely not my intention. In fact, I'm enjoying making the videos a lot more than I thought I would, or I was fairly sure I would enjoy this part, the speaking part and the chatting part, the talking through the knitting. I was quite worried that I would hate the video editing, and I actually don't. When it's going well, I actually really enjoy that part, and that's kind of an unexpected bonus. So definitely no intention to stop, but maybe less frequent over the summer, and I'm just gonna try to not put any pressure on myself and let that be what it is. During the summer months, I mean, I think, you know, lots of us with various chronic illnesses, especially if our chronic illnesses affect our joints, can be really impacted by the heat. And I am headed to the south of the country where it is about 10 degrees warmer than it is up here. I'm a bit scared, and I expect that may also impact my hands. So, you know, that's something I can manage. In the past it hasn't been too terrible, but that may very well mean that I do less knitting or feel like doing less knitting, and I'm just not going to force that either. So big rambly introduction, basically just to say, I hope you haven't been wondering where I've disappeared to. I may well disappear a bit again, but it won't be permanent. I definitely, you know, intend to come back and post at least a couple of, there are a few videos that are kind of place-based that I'm quite excited to film this summer. Maybe some more process-based things, some kind of more playful things. So definitely planning to upload at least some over the summer, but definitely also coming back to a kind of more regular routine in the autumn, which may be a big change from the summer or may just feel like a continuation of the summer depending on how things go. I'm really not sure. But that is kind of what I wanted to get out of the way today, just to check in and let you know where I am and where I may or may not be over the next couple of months. But I do have some really exciting knitting to talk to you about today, so let's turn to that. Okay, so I only have one finished object to talk about today, but it's a finished object that I'm really, really jazzed about. And this won't be a surprise, probably if you checked in on the last video, because it was definitely my intention to go back and knit these first. But my first and only finished object, oh, that one's upside down, is a pair of, what are they called? They're the Basic Rib Sock. The Basic Rib Sock by Kate Atherley, whose name I completely blanked on in the previous video and read and didn't make the connection. I have a book of hers on knitting. I think she's great. I don't know why I hadn't made that connection, that it's the same Kate Atherley. But anyways, I think she's really great. I was saying last time that I picked it in particular because Elizabeth Zimmerman really, suggests that a ribbed sock is a good place to start, especially if you're not sure about the fit of socks. And I think that that has been true for me. Last time I was speaking about trying to find the right needle size and the right stitch count. For this sock, I ended up going with 64 stitches on 2.25 millimeter needles. And I think that's been really, really good. I may still need to do more figuring out as I do, more vanilla socks that aren't ribbed or socks and patterns. But certainly for this sock, I feel like I arrived at a pretty good fit, and I'm starting to learn what I like in a sock fit. So what else can I share with you about these? These are knit in, oh, we've got lots of kids running by outside. It's good happy noise. I hope it's not too distracting for us though. So this is knit in the Kremke Sole wool, which I do not actually have with me, the ball band, but Kremke Sole 4-ply. It's their Edelweiss 4-ply, and it is great. I'm really, really happy with it. It's a non-superwash wool, and it does contain, it wasn't nylon, was it just... Anyways, it does contain some synthetic fibers, I believe 20%, but the synthetic fibers are taken fully from recycled bottles, which is great. You get that durability, but it's recycled. So I'm really pleased with the wool. I do have a few other colors, and I will definitely be making more of these. I found it behaved when I blocked it very much the way that I expected it would. I gave myself just a little bit of extra length, just a little bit of, extra sock beyond my big toe, to make sure that it wouldn't be too tight, and I found that they did pull in just a little tiny bit, being a non-superwash wool, but not drastically, and they fit really, really comfortably. Now, I have worn them a little bit, but not a ton, because we are just getting to the time of the year where I don't really want to be wearing wool socks. I also have not photographed these yet, and maybe I'll manage to do that and share a photograph so you can see that, how they actually fit on my feet, but I have not gotten around to doing that yet, and I'm conscious that I don't want to wear them a ton before I do that. If I don't manage to do that by the time that I put this video out, if I'm being totally honest, I might just be, I might just not worry about the photographs and just start wearing them and, not worry about it too much, because, you gotta do what's gonna give you joy. So I made them just a little bit longer than I expected. I did really, really enjoy these. I had so much fun with these. It's a really good it was fun not thinking for the cuff and for the foot, but the heel, oh my God. Turning the heel was so much fun. It makes total sense, the way that it works. The engineering of it does make sense, and I understand how it works, but it still really, really felt like magic as, you decrease down and then pick up those stitches along the sides, and all of a sudden you've got this incredible, you know, like 90-degree angle in your sock. It was so much fun. And you know, for me, I think it was that perfect balance. I really do feel like I understand people who are so crazy about knitting socks now. I don't know, if you love knitting socks, is this part of what you love? Like, for me, it was that perfect balance of interesting and engaging and fun, but it also wasn't too difficult. Like, I didn't have a hard time figuring out what I was doing, and it wasn't hard to keep track of the stitches. It wasn't like there was a complicated pattern where, you know, I kept falling out of the pattern and going, oh, okay, I have to, you know, rip back a couple stitches. It was just the perfect balance of engaging and really fun geometry happening, but not challenging. So I was very, very pleased with that. The only real modification that I made, but which is, I guess, a fairly significant modification, and you'll be able to see it if I hold up my socks like this. Maybe you can see against my wall a bit more easily. But I have never knit socks before, of course, so maybe this is a bit preemptive. Maybe I should have gone with just a bit more of a basic construction to begin with. But in my commercially made socks, and you know, the socks that I buy, I always wear through the toe, the big toe first. That's where my socks show wear first. I must just have pointy toes. I don't I don't know, but that's always where I wear my socks at first. They wear them out quickly enough that I do darn my commercially bought socks just to like prolong them. You know, I'll darn them a couple of times before the socks really start to show wear elsewhere. And I had been watching Mel Makes Stuff with Melissa Lund. If you're not familiar with that podcast, I mean, I'm conscious that you know, I'm so like new to the internet and new to the knitting internet, certainly, and I'm conscious that I'm constantly directing you towards very massive channels that you are probably much more familiar with than I am, so apologies if I am doing that. But if you are not aware of Melissa Lund, Mel Makes Stuff, I would really recommend her. I mean, she's just so informed and so generous with the way that she shares her information, and she tackles really ambitious, quite challenging, elaborate knitting projects, and it's always really fun to watch someone do that kind of stuff. So anyways, I was watching her podcast, and she was talking about a free sock pattern that she has released because she also tends to wear through the toe of her socks, the big toe area of her socks first. And so she made, it's called, they're called her bespoke vanilla socks. And they're bespoke in that they kind of, you decrease asymmetrically. So you continue on straight on the big toe side of your sock for, you know, a specific length. And I think that would be quite easy to tailor. I did knit it exactly as she wrote in the pattern, but you know, as I was doing it, it was becoming quite clear that it would be quite easy to even extend that, so you hold off decreasing on the big toe side even longer, or you could do it earlier, depending on your particular feet, your particular preference, but you kind of decrease as seems to be called for in other patterns along the side with your smaller toes, so your little toe, and do it later, and then more steeply for the big toe, and it gives you this kind of asymmetrical toe. And that does mean, of course, that the socks have specific feet, so they're not interchangeable. There is a right foot and a left foot, which might be a bit, I haven't been wearing them enough to know if I'm going to find it strange to have to remember to put the socks on the right feet, but I think that that is probably a small inconvenience to, in exchange for hopefully socks that will last a bit longer for me, or last a bit longer before I have to darn them. So I will report back on that, but I was pleased enough with the toe, and it fits my feet comfortably enough that I really do kind of see myself maybe using that, bespoke toe and applying it to maybe all future socks for myself. So we'll see. I'll check back when I have more wear on these, which may well be autumn, because I don't think I'm gonna pack these with me at all this summer. But so far, very, very pleased, and yeah, I get I get the sock craze. I definitely understand why knitters I've known in the past have been so crazy about socks and kind of say, you know, it's okay that you're not there yet, but when you get there, you'll really get it. I do really get it, and I definitely have plans to cast on more socks very soon. So that's my one and only finished object, and on to works in progress. So I have gone back. The main work in progress that I want to talk to you about is the one that I felt like I was shirking a little bit. I was falling behind, and I have gone back, and it has been a lot of fun to pick it up again. It is as I hoped. Once I picked it up and started again, then I was really motivated to keep going with it again. I'm lagging a bit now because I've reached the body and it's just rounds and rounds and rounds of stockinette, and with that slightly less elastic wool, and it is hurting my hands a little bit, so I'm slowing down a little bit again, but you know, there's definitely the motivation to get this done for Mom. So anyways, I'm very ahead of myself. If you haven't joined before, you're like, what the heck is this lady talking about? So this is the Stor Stormur by Mayu Kallio, and this is a really lovely stranded yoke sweater that I am knitting out of plötulopi, unspun Icelandic wool. I am continuing to find this brown scale sweater's quantity of wool more pleasant to work with than my previous experience working with plötulopi, which was still a very positive experience, but the gray that I had worked with previously was just a bit harder to felt together. It was just a little bit more resistant to being stuck back together when the fibers came apart, as does happen since it's unspun. But the brown is just lovely. It is really, really delightful. It's so sheepy smelling. It's really like it's a sensory pleasure to work with this wool for sure. And you know, I've been showing it to Mom when we do video calls, and she's very excited to see the progress, and very excited to be able to wear it, not in the summer, because Mom lives in Montreal and they're having, you know, a 35-degree heat wave right now, or they've just come out of a 35 degrees Celsius heat wave. So not now, but I think it'll be very useful in the winter. So the progress that I have made on this since I showed it to you last is that I have done the sleeves, and there's not too much to say about the sleeves. I followed them pretty much exactly to pattern, except that, you know, once you finish all of the decreases as written, the pattern says, you know, continue to knit the sleeve until it measures X centimeters, and I substituted that for a measurement based on, you know, measurements that I'd taken of Mom and you know, measurements I'd taken of her wearing various sweaters of mine, and kind of, you know, she wanted her sleeves an inch shorter than my gray plötulopi sweater, and kind of 3/4 of an inch shorter than my green Monday sweater. So things like that. I substituted in a measurement there, but otherwise, you know, I'm really knitting this pretty much exactly to pattern. And it was a real pleasure to have, after knitting the basic kind of stockinette stitch for the sleeve, it was really, really pleasing to have the Fair Isle here. And I'm trying to use that, or not the Fair Isle, because it's not the Scottish tradition, the stranded knitting here, excuse me. And I'm quite pleased that the pattern calls for that at the bottom ribbing on the body as well, because I'm going to use that to motivate myself to get through more of this. It is curling up a bit. I have done more than it appears to be in here. Not that much more, though I still have a ways to go. So this May, I'm leaving quite soon to go and work in a different city. So we'll see. It may have to just sit, and I'll pick it back up again when I come home. But I'm not too worried about getting it done by the time I go to visit Mom in August. That should be still plenty of time, and even if I'm finishing it up while I'm there, you know, they can't really manage without air conditioning in Montreal anymore. So my parents do have some. They resisted for a long time. So worst comes to worst, I can sit near the AC and get it finished for mom. Because we don't, you know, AC is still much less common in the UK. And it wouldn't be worth taking this with me to go down south and try to work on it where they're having, I think it's 29 degrees in London today. I'm not looking forward to, yeah, it's hot. So some good progress. I'm quite pleased with it. I mean, it's just such a beautiful sweater, and I have to say, as I'm working on this, it is such a lovely sweater, and I've been trying it on, you know, just to make sure that things more or less make sense, that the shaping is working the way that I was hoping it would, and it is a very cute sweater. Mom and I wear very different colors. I would probably buy something I would probably get colors that are slightly more my palette, but I do definitely think that I will knit one of these for myself at some point. Maybe not, you know, in the next year or so, because I'd like to have a bit of variety, but definitely in a couple years time I'd really like to circle back around to this one and make one for myself, because it is beautiful. And oh my gosh, the doubling up of, I mean, this is knitted in Iran weight, so I am holding my plötulopi double to begin with, but then doubling up, the plötulopi held double, so you've got kind of, you know, 4 strands throughout most of this yoke section. Oh, it's so squishy and so warm and so wonderful. So I'm really, really pleased with the pattern. I think that's all I have to say about this one. Okay, on to abandoned whips and future plans. Okay, so partially I've been feeling still a little tiny bit off my knitting game, in the sense that since I last spoke to you and I had made all sorts of mistakes and had to frog a lot of things, I have felt like things have just been a little bit up in the air, and I haven't really committed to one big project that I can work on for an extended period of time, and that tends to be my comfort zone for knitting. I like to have, you know, I tend to be a fairly monogamous knitter, and I like to have one kind of really immersive project that once I'm in it, then I don't really have to think about what I'm going to knit next, because I'm just knitting. I hadn't really thought about this very much before I started to talk to you all about it, but kind of doing these videos and talking about my process a bit more out loud is helping me to realize that I don't really like starting new projects. I like once I'm in enough, I know what needles I'm using, I know what gauge I'm using, I know what size I've decided to knit, I know how the math is going to work out, so I have an idea of what size the garment is going to turn out to be, since I'm usually knitting garments. I like all of those decisions to have been made, and then I'm just doing it. And I've been having a bit of a hard time committing to those kind of projects. And I think, you know, really just this week, as I've had friends visiting and been packing and kind of thinking about the summer, it's making me look back over the past month and realize that in part, I think I've had a hard time committing to a big project, because I realized that there wasn't really time to finish anything big before I was going to be going away, and I don't plan to bring anything sizable with me. I'm not going to have a lot of luggage with me, and you know, I have some work things that I have to bring and some things like that, so I think maybe that's part of why I've been just a little bit off my knitting game for the last month, which was really reassuring, because it's, you know, that's fine, that's, you know, an external factor, and I can just kind of accept that and know that that will probably shift as life calms down again. But all of that to say, the Caledonia sweater by Sylvia Watts Cherry that I showed you last time, and that I was having so much fun knitting on the wrong size needles. I just picked up the wrong size, or rather I forgot to change needles when I went from the ribbing to the body, a very, very silly mistake. I have not gone back and re-knit that, and I don't plan to immediately. I definitely plan to in the autumn, but especially because it's a construction where you knit the pieces separately and then seam them together, I want to make sure that I have all of the pieces with me as I knit, and I want to be able to take things fairly slow and, you know, take measurements and it's just a bit trickier to try that on as you go. So I don't think that that's a problem, but I'm conscious that, you know, summertime knitting, when I'm not in my environment, when I'm not going to bring all of my, you know, knitting accessories with me or anything like that. And I'm probably just going to be a little bit more frazzled, a little bit less concentrated in my knitting over the summer than I have been over the past several months. So I'm going to put that project into hibernation. I'll pick that back up in the autumn when things calm down again. I'm a bit sad about that because the yarn is so beautiful and the green is so gorgeous. And you know, when I first decided to knit that, I had kind of been thinking that that would be a great lightweight sweater to pack with me and kind of have for evenings and stuff. But it's not to be, so I've put that into hibernation, and I've picked up and started a few other things. And you know, I was feeling like I should really have something to round out this podcast so that round out this video podcast so that you have an idea of where I'm going next. But the truth is, to be honest, I'm not really sure what I'm going to knit next. I've been a bit all over the place. I have a few different ideas, and it may well just come down to what yarn I feel most excited to pack with me when I finalize that. So I'm not sure where I'm headed next, but I will definitely be doing certain projects over the summer. I have a few things that I'm really excited to cover, and I'm keeping just a little bit secret, not in, you know, a little bit in the way that I was keeping the Bighorn sweater secret, not because it will really spoil anything, but just because I think having it as a contained video was really nice. The project that I'm thinking of doing next with that is not, I'm not designing it or anything like that, but it is kind of a bit more literary and tying in some of those things. So I definitely have plans in terms of you know, knitting projects that I'm excited to talk about, but in terms of kind of regular updates on what I'm knitting on, we'll see. I will let you know when I next have a chance to sit down and do one of these. So I hope that that's not too flighty. I'm feeling quite positive about it, actually. Now that once I kind of realized that my indecision was a product of just not being sure how much time I was going to have and not wanting to have to get really into something that I would then abandon and have a hard time picking up again. I don't know if, you know, you have that. I think a top-down all one-piece sweater is a construction that I'm comfortable enough that would be fine, but the pieced construction of the Caledonia, I was just conscious that if I, you know, did half of it now and then came back in 3 months and tried to pick up the other half, I might find it difficult to get back into the swing of where I was with it, and you know, I might find that a bit challenging. So that's, you know, that's something that I can be easier on myself about, and I'm just not going to worry about it too much. I feel like I've gone in circles on you there a little bit, but no concrete plans, but definitely knitting to come, and I just have 1 or 2 more updates for you. Okay, so the final thing that I wanted to talk to you about today, just really quickly, is just flagging a kind of online event in case you're interested. And I'm conscious that I will definitely only be able to attend part of this, and I'm not sure how much of that part. I'm really hoping that my health will hold. When I'm very busy, I'm going to be doing quite a bit of teaching in July, and it sometimes happens when I get back into an intensive teaching schedule that I really crash and have quite a health dip on the weekends when I know that I don't need to be on. And so I don't want to, I'm going to try. I'm quite excited about this. I'm hoping to attend, but it may or may not happen in the end. I'm hoping that some of you might be available and might be, excited to attend this if it's your kind of thing. So I thought it would be worth sharing just in case, because it's free. And I'm doing that thing where I'm babbling too much and I haven't told you what this is yet. So to tell you what this is, the Arbon Textiles, which is a really lovely, now it's a woman-owned mill, down in the south in Devon, and they had their in-person mill open weekend where they do tours of the mill they have lots of kind of antique machinery and 20th century machinery, and just really lovely events. I've never been able to go in person, but they are hosting not next weekend, but the following weekend. So on Saturday the 6th of July and Sunday the 7th of July, they're having their virtual open weekend, and there are lots of great talks taking place, and it's all free. So I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up for that in case it's your kind of thing, because I'm conscious, we're so international in these communities online. There are very few times that we can, give each other heads up about in-person events that we could all attend, but this is something, it's online, it's not location dependent. It is a little bit time zone dependent, so I'm conscious that this may be, more convenient for those of us in the UK or, probably on the east coast of North America than elsewhere, and South America, and, for the Australians, it's probably, the time difference might be a bit more, more difficult if you're in Asia or Australia or something like that. So there's the time zone consideration, but otherwise it is free and open to everyone. And at the time of filming this, I'm filming this on Monday the 24th of June, and I checked before filming just to make sure that there are still tickets available. And at the time of filming there are. So I'm gonna try to upload this a bit more speedily than I usually do, so that remains true by the time that this comes out. But just to give you an idea of the kinds of events that they're having, in case you're curious, they're gonna have, a virtual launch party, but there's also practical tips to perfect your plying with Bex of Tiny Fiber Studio. I'm very intrigued. Patterns Made Simple, a Q&A with Emily Wessel of Tin Can Knits. That also sounds really interesting. Those are both on the Saturday. There's Color Play. On Sunday, Explore the World of Beaded Knitting with Jeanette Sloan. I'm not available on Sunday the 7th, unfortunately, but that sounds really great. There's a 10 best crochet hacks for beginners. That's again on Sunday the 7th, but it's always nice to see, crochet can be a bit underrepresented sometimes at some of these, and it's terrible. I often call them knitting festivals, don't I? But these yarn festivals, they are yarn festivals, not knitting festivals. So it's nice to have crochet represented. And then they've got a show and tell with the mill folk. They're going to be talking about their yarns and things like that. So I will pop a link to the website with descriptions of all of these talks, and you just click on them and to book tickets. So I'll put that along with all the other usual information down below. But I hope that if you didn't know about this before and you know about it now, that's a fun thing that you might be able to nip into even just a little bit on the weekend of the 6th and the 7th. So that is everything that I wanted to share with you today. I apologize, it's a bit knitting light, but it's knitting light, but all knitting satisfaction. That doesn't make it. It's knitting light, but the knitting that I did manage to do has been very satisfying for me. And I'm definitely planning, I've got lots of plans for socks. I think that's going to be a very portable, nice thing. So I might do quite a bit more sock knitting over the summer, but we'll see. So all good stuff. I hope that things are similarly good on your ends. I hope that if things are busy, they're busy in a positive, joyful way, and that you're getting some nice weather, whichever direction your weather is headed. But as always, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a real pleasure to chat with you as always, and I will hopefully talk to you soon.